Hey Dan, how you doing, man?
How's it going?
Great. Thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to learn a little more about goPuff. So happy to give you a quick intro before we dive into some of our time together. So we have today with us Dan Folkman. He's the VP of Business at goPuff. Dan oversees the development of goPuff's brand and strategic partnerships with some of the world's largest companies, such as Coca-Cola and the Hershey's Company. And so Dan's team has also developed partnerships outside of brands with payment providers like Venmo, MasterCard, and Chase. Dan's a thought leader in the tech and CPG spaces. He spends a lot of time consulting, advising, and operating startups that have an emphasis, or with an emphasis, on business development, corporate strategy, and brand partnerships. And so a quick rundown on goPuff. It's a digital delivery service that allows consumers to buy everyday essentials in minutes through its mobile app. And so goPuff has over 200 facilities that deliver to 500 cities and is always looking to add more facilities. So, that's just a quick intro, but would love, Dan, to hand that off to you. If you want to add a little more to that or go into goPuff and maybe some of the problems that you guys help solve.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think you did that plenty justice. I don't know that I could have said it as well myself. You said it. We deliver everyday essentials, everything from, ice cream and cleaning supplies to alcohol and pet care products and everything in between. We're able to do it super fast. We're open, 24/7 in most of our markets. And we do it for a flat $1.95 delivery fee. So, effectively, the problem that we're solving is, how can we get products to people faster, more affordably, and more effectively, right? And so, that was like the mission that our founders set out early on in the business, and that's kind of held true as the models evolved over time. The way we're able to do that, our key differentiator is really the vertical integration. So you mentioned it. We operate 200 facilities across 500 cities, or serving 500 cities, and ultimately that end-to-end control of the customer experience is really what enables us to do that. So rather than connecting couriers and merchants, we're connecting people and products. And we're doing it in a way where they don't have to leave the comfort of wherever they are. And today, more than ever, that's become insanely essential and critical to everybody's everyday life. So, that's like effectively the problem that we're solving and how the model works from a high level.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I think you mentioned two great points. One about the climate today, and then also wanted the vertical kind of integration. Wanted to dive in a little bit there. I'm trying to imagine, are you running like these facilities, warehouses where you stock goods from hundreds of brands? Can you go into a little more detail there?
Yeah, basically, we carry roughly between 2,500 and 3,000 SKUs across categories that I mentioned. We also carry, baby, beauty, over-the-counter medicine, so we're stocking our warehouses. We own the inventory, and then we're fulfilling directly through a network of driver partners. So our driver partners are able to come to our facilities, pick up multiple orders, take them out, and drop them off to our customers. So really, if you look at our model, it's a hyper local, delivery model for these everyday essentials and immediate needs.
And so these 200 facilities are kind of spread out strategically across the 500 cities, so you have always the best route to the consumer.
Exactly.
Awesome. So, as we're thinking about e-commerce, on-demand delivery, and then direct consumer businesses, right? A lot of what you're describing sounds a lot like what Amazon might do. But we'd love to hear from your perspective. Why are all these things becoming more important during the pandemic? And also, how you think about what makes goPuff's approach unique compared to some other vendors?
Yeah, well, I can't comment on Amazon's strategy, but I can talk to you a little bit about, what we're doing and why we think, our offering is valuable to the customers that we serve. I think early on in our life stages as a business, our customer was skewed a bit younger, right? today. I mean, millennials and urban dwellers are a key portion of our demographic, but one of our fastest growing cohorts is parents, as you can imagine. And so this idea of immediate and everyday needs was always something that was prevalent in everyone's life, right? I mean, it's what started early as this this impulse-driven purchasing behavior online, with snacks and some of these other products, has kind of carried across multiple categories. I mean, you don't think that laundry detergent's an impulsive purchase until you're out of it, and then you realize how bad you need it. And so, effectively, like with what's going on in the past few months with COVID, it's really just served as an accelerant to kind of that adoption. And so the way that I've said it recently is like, all of a sudden overnight, the early adopters became the norm. I think before COVID, and don't quote me on these numbers, but I think before COVID, it was like 5% adoption in the US of grocery online. I think I read a report recently that had it as high as 14% as of June, which is pretty insane. So even if you split the difference, you think about that kind of growth and adoption. And then you think about, some of the challenges that something like COVID created, right? The constraint that it put on a lot of supply chains, a lot of operations across the country, and for us to have that hyperlocal model and still be able to put those products that people wanted but also needed in these like desperate moments, in these critical moments, and still be able to do it in that 20 to 30 minute window, while a lot of companies were doing their best but struggling to be able to even fulfill same day. We really saw our model emerge as kind of a key service for customers, and have been fortunate to see that kind of accelerated growth. But it was stuff that we were already seeing. I think it just woke a lot of people up to how important this type of model was, and that idea of controlling your own supply chain and having the full vertical integration allowed us to have that optionality, or that flexibility, I should say, to make sure we were servicing our customers to the best of our ability.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you touch upon a big pain point. As I'm thinking about like the height of the pandemic, when things were at the worst, it took 2 weeks to get an order from like Whole Foods. And so I'm trying to imagine like having full control over that. The vertical stack does help solve and alleviate some of that friction. Really cool. Like I think this is a really natural transition into talking a little more about the pandemic. People are staying home. They're making purchases mostly online now. And we're seeing a lot of, like you mentioned, like the 4% to 5% to 14% jump in grocery even. Like there seems to be this momentum and growing comfort and adoption of purchasing online. Like, could you help rationalize like why, and as we're thinking about direct to consumer, like why is this critical for retail, and why should brands be investing behind their own e-commerce strategy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, if you ask someone like me, and maybe I'm biased, it became critical years ago. But I think everyone's paying attention now. I think, the pandemic exposed a number of inefficiencies in the current model, in the current models that exist today, right? Both in retail and, we operate mainly in CPG. I mean, you mentioned we work with a lot of big consumer brands outside of CPG, but that's our kind of our bread and butter, as you can imagine. That said, I mean, we don't technically consider ourselves a retailer. We consider ourselves, a tech company. We believe we've kind of created this new category, and we call it instant needs. But it's become more and more critical that big brands and retailers, I think, are investing in what their e-commerce or direct-to-consumer strategy is. I mean, it like I said, it should have been something that was like core to their business. I think 3 or 4 years ago, when we really started to grow, we had a lot of conversations with a lot of big brands that we worked with, and it was very much, hey, e-commerce is not really a strategy anymore. E-commerce needs to be at like the center of everything you do, because although, like I said, 5% adoption in the US, it's not 5% adoption in the US doesn't equate to a material contribution to the bottom line for a lot of these big brands yet. But as you can see, overnight in 3 months, you tripled that adoption in the US. And there's nothing that leads me or a lot of the people that we speak with to believe that this trend is going to slow down just because, we get out of, hopefully one day soon, what's going on in the world. right? Because I think what this has done is this has dramatically changed the way that people think. And I think the long tail impact of the pandemic to consumer psychology will be felt for a very long time. And so people are now seeing, and one of the trends that we see that we don't see going away is this, we call it like fast casual cooking. A lot of people, who myself included, I would eat dinner out 5 nights a week, right? Whether business dinners or friends or whatever, that just went away like overnight, and there was no option, right? Personally, I'm not eager to jump to a restaurant that's like half outdoors, and you kind of have to be like very timid in how you enjoy yourself. So you have people like me who are starting to cook, but like I don't have 3 hours a day to make this gourmet meal. I have 15 or 20 minutes between a conference call, and so you're buying these cooking supplies or these frozen vegetables or whatever it is, so you can throw together a meal. And I think people are realizing, one, it's cheaper. 2, it's healthier. And 3, all of a sudden, like there is this world that exists where you don't have to go out to eat all the time. Now, I'm not saying like restaurants go away, and I hope, there's a lot of great restaurants in the world, and I'm a big fan, and I think one day there'll be a resurgence there. But my point is that behavior isn't just going to go away overnight. And so it becomes more critical today than ever that both retailers and brands are thinking about this new world that we're moving into, which, by the way, like there's a lot of data in a lot of other countries that were way ahead of the US before this in terms of e-com adoption, specifically in grocery, right? Like we are the laggard, which is crazy. I've always found that fascinating that, in places like, Asia, the adoption was almost 20%. But pre-pandemic. So it's you see it elsewhere. We're just behind. It's absolutely imperative to the longevity of these companies that they have sustainable strategies in place for e-com and direct consumer. Now, I think depending on who they are and what they do, there's a difference between those two things. Right. We've built this last mile delivery network. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that large CPG brands go out and build that themselves. But there are a number of solutions they can explore and strategies they can put in place.
Yeah, so you bring up a really good point. I think 2 things before we move into what I want to end with, which is like how can brands start thinking about working with goPuff. As we're looking at internationally, you mentioned like Asia as like almost a model for how direct-to-consumer e-commerce can be. Like any thoughts around like why we're laggards? Like why is it like a technology thing? Is it a consumer issue? Difference in consumer preference? Thoughts on why that is and how perhaps we can get to where in the future of this.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I wish I had a good answer for that. Because you see it, right? It's if you've ever been to some cities in China or Japan, I mean, you see how efficient they are, especially when it comes to kind of this industry, and you really do wonder why we haven't gotten there faster. I'll have to think on that and come back to you on like a really good answer as to why. I do hope though that, as like tragic as what we've gone through has been and will be, I think for the foreseeable near future, that it serves as a huge learning opportunity for our industries and for a lot of these companies. I mean, you've very quickly seen the pandemic has split very visibly the fragile versus the anti-fragile businesses and industries. And so you hope that people are going to look at that and think through the sustainability of the models that they're building today for what they can't foresee happening 10, 15, 20 years from now. I think, you could argue that there are certain things that some of these other countries have experienced that we never did, that led to that adoption of technology or innovation earlier. But that's, I think, probably a whole nother topic and panel to discuss that I'm probably not suited to be on.
Yeah. I think there is definitely a silver lining as we're thinking about the effects of the pandemic. And you mentioned in the beginning, one, which is revealing the inefficiencies in the supply chain or just the ecosystem in general. And then 2, the power of it to compress timelines, like innovation timelines. Things that would have taken a decade to materialize now has happened in 3 to 4 months. So I think it's definitely like conducive to innovation and as unfortunate as it is, but it's definitely really interesting to just observe and kind of respond and adapt.
Yeah, I think one of the most amazing things that we have seen is like the rapid mobilization for solution, right? That's something where, R&D cycles and innovation processes used to take 12, 18 months. And all of a sudden in a 3-month period, you've seen more innovation than you've probably seen in the last 2 years in certain industries. So hope you're right. Hopefully that's a nice silver lining.
Yeah, awesome. So I think we're interested in our audience is comprised of a lot of brands, and so a lot of kind of your perspectives on that, right? Since goPuff works really closely with brands, could you tell us a little more about what you're seeing? How are your brand partners like adapting during this time? And then, as the last portion, maybe we'll transition. How can a new brand
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of the conversations we're having are centered around probably 3 things, right? I mean, I think the first is like, and I apologize, it sounds like there's a phone ringing. The first thing is really about reassessing and understanding who your consumer is and what you know about them and what you don't know about them, right? And how have their lifestyles changed? How have their needs changed? And like, what does that translate to in terms of their behavior, in terms of purchasing with your business, right? And so certain areas of their needs probably have grown or accelerated, whereas others, maybe not so much, right? If you think about the example I gave with this like fast casual cooking, right? Once you have that understanding, it's making sure that your messaging, your marketing, your targeting is very focused on what these new needs are and that you're speaking to them today and in the future and not the way that you used to. So that's one thing, is really that like deep dive into the consumer and their need, the why behind the decisions they're making today. The second is like, we just talked about it, like adopting online strategies faster. Consumers have been online for a while. And one of the things that we've always felt was an advantage was, we're digitally native, and that's where our consumers spend their time, right? Now more than ever, they're spending their time digitally, right? And you're seeing the emergence of some industries that are, fascinating because of what's going on. So really understanding like their lifestyle and their habit, and making sure you're speaking to them with the right context and in the right places. And then lastly, like being nimble and like, how do you change your processes and the way that you operate to optimize for more real-time investments and more short-term impact that is sustainable, over the coming months and years, versus thinking, you have to be thinking ahead, obviously, but what like foundation are you putting in place today that will allow you to handle what's going on and what you may not know is coming around the corner.
Awesome. And then last question, and this is related to your category. Are you bullish on home cooking kits?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think maybe not the way they've been in the past.
Yeah.
I think what I would say is I'm bullish on an increase in home cooking. What that looks like, I think we're still all figuring out. But I would say it's safe to say that I'm confident that people will be cooking more in their homes, both tomorrow and in the longer term.
Awesome. Well, Dan, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you want to connect with the audience and if they have additional Q&A questions, there's a session button on the left where one of my colleagues, Stephen, will be moderating. So feel free to jump in and have some additional conversation. But again, thank you so much for your time, and we'll look to connect you with some folks who are interested.
Awesome. Thank you, Leon. This was a great conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Bye.